So thank you for being here. I prepared this presentation to update you about what we did during the last month in the Symfony repository, especially. Of course, I focused on what is useful or could be useful in the context of writing APIs, but not only, because there are also useful things that you might want to leverage in Symfony for maybe other projects or other parts of the same application. So, quick reminder, Symfony, this is a slide from Fabian from a previous talk. Symfony is a fantastic set of low-level building blocks that you can assemble to develop anything like console or web applications. I think you know about that. This is the story about the components. So Symfony is a collection of components, and then many projects use that, open source and non-open source, to build their own solution. But that's not only it. Symfony is also a framework. So it's a cohesive set of practices and conventions and things wired together. And I think the most specific things that this wiring provide, the framework, is auto-discovery, so that you don't have to write configuration anymore. It's auto-configuration, so that you don't have to explicitly say that a command is a command, an event listener is an event listener, because you just implement the correct interfaces and it works out of the box, thanks to auto-configuration. And the last one, you've heard about that many times, I guess, which is auto-wiring. And this one is a mechanism that is responsible for figuring out how or what should be injected in the arguments of your constructors, right? And I think this defines the Symfony experience since many years. What is new is attributes. And this is new thanks to PHP 8, of course, and Symfony 6. So in this talk, you're going to see many, many attributes, because I think that's where we provided the most recent innovations in the Symfony ecosystem, and not only, of course, because PHP is also adopting the community, adopting attributes more and more. So some example of attributes. Routes. So there you see, you can just use attribute route, define the route. This is on a controller, of course. Is granted, like you know this one. There is something new in this slide, which is granted. It used to be in a third-party package, the Sensio Framework Extra Bundle. Long name, right? So this is a thing of the past. We deprecated the integration with this extra bundle, because now it's not extra anymore. It's native, core to Symfony. And we can do that because this is native. Before, we added that in another component because all the logic related to loading, parsing annotations, we didn't want that to be in core and to make that mandatory, the dependency on this doctrine annotation package. So now we are free, and we can put that in core, so we did. One new feature on this topic, the route attribute, there you see name. That's the name of the route, of course. And this is the name there is what you use to generate a route to this controller. We added a new feature, which is an alias that is created automatically, that is using the fully qualified class name, so that if you prefer, you can now use that. When I mean now, it's not released yet because it's in 6.4. So if you want to generate a route, you take the router, and you compute there, you concatenate the name of the class and the name of the method. But if your controller is an invocable, you don't have to add the last part. And I think API Platform recommends that, so it could be easier to generate routes. This works also in Twig templates, but typing a fully qualified class name in a template is not that easy. So that's something we might work on, I don't know how in the future, but that's still something nice to have and to build on. Other examples, I mentioned auto-wiring at the beginning, and of course, we have an attribute to define how an argument should be wired. So by default, you don't need that, of course, because the type int is many times, in many situations, enough. But if it's not, like this is a scalar, we are expecting a Boolean, and then thanks to the attribute, we say, oh, I want this to be by default, and thanks to auto-wiring, kernel.debug parameter. This works also for a service, of course, so auto-wire service, and then you give the ID, the identifier of the service. So this is a Symfony loader, Twig loader, but of course you can use your classes there because services are named after the fully qualified class name for your applications most of the time. So this makes it very descriptive. This is very descriptive, and it works super well also with tests, because then the attributes, they are just declarative piece of information. And this is critical. This is not coupling to Symfony at all. This is your own class. It is completely standalone. And if this class is used in the context of Symfony, then Symfony will know how to use it. But if you use it in another context, like test, for example, then you are free to ignore the attributes and inject what you want for the test case. And this is true for every single attribute. That's a mindset. Attributes should be designed so that they are purely declarative. They don't introduce coupling ever. So another one, this one is auto-configure. And so this one we say to Symfony how to register the service in the container. And this is lazy true, that's one example, but lazy true is telling to Symfony, make this class lazy. So that don't create an instance of this class, or actually don't instantiate its dependencies unless the class is actually used. What this means is that unless you call any method on that, the constructor will not be called. So that is native to Symfony since 1 year. And so the container is going to generate the code to make that lazy. You just add this attribute, and then there is a lot of boilerplate that is reused and generated for you when the container is created, so when the application is first run. Of course, with auto-configure, you can also add tags, for example. So if you want to add a tag on a specific type of objects, you can say auto-configure tag foo, and then all those classes will have the foo tag. And that's how we made the as command attribute work, or the as event listener one, etc., etc. They all extend this auto-configure base class attribute, and they just force a value for the tag of the attribute. So there are many of them. There are more than this list. So as entity listener, this is to configure your doctrine entities or callbacks on that. As event listener, but this one, if you want to listen to the request, to the response, to the view, to etc., so to hook into the request lifecycle. As command, this is on a command, of course. As controller, so this one, you can use it if you want to not extend the abstract controller, because you don't need it if you extend the abstract controller. And you can use it if you want your controllers to be able to get services as action parameters, in case you want to do that. Right? This works thanks to service registration, and you need this attribute to make that work. Another one, as message handler. The good thing with attribute is that they add useful information for Symfony on some classes, and they also allow removing interfaces that we were using as a hack as marker interfaces, like an interface that is empty and that is just there to label a class. We don't use that anymore. We deprecated the message handler interface, which was one of those empty interfaces, and we said, oh, use the attribute now. It's much better, it's cleaner, it's more decoupled this way. Make sense? So back to Symfony, this is where we are today, September 22. We are maintaining 5.4, which is the long-term supported version. Don't use it unless you started your project years ago and you are late in upgrading, right? 6.3, which is the one you should be using already. And today, this is the one you should use also to start new projects, because 6.4 is going to be released at the end of November, and this one is going to be the next LTS. So if you start now, in a few months you upgrade, composer upgrade, and done. No BC breaks. You can continue and have many years of maintenance. Or you can get ready for 7.0, which is also going to be released at the end of November. Symfony 6, as a quick reminder, this is critical. You need to understand that if you didn't see this slide before. I like putting them in almost every presentation I do. So Symfony 6 is PHP 8.1 minimum. We push a new release features every 6 months. So every 6 months, you should also upgrade because no BC breaks. Thanks to the backward compatibility promise. So it should be very easy to just update within the same minor. And we also do a release every month. So every month, also run composer update, but just for the patch level version number, the last one. So 6.3.4 might be the next one, or .5, I don't remember. So do that once a month so that you get the latest fixes. We release before the end of the month, so you can upgrade at the beginning of every month. You will have the latest release. If you have that in mind, you will know the mechanism. Symfony 7 is going to be a new major version. So major version means backward compatibility breaks, right? So we bumped PHP minimum to 8.2. We do that every 2 years. So it's like a clock. We decided to remove deprecated code path every 2 years. And this makes it predictable and also smooth, because we also have this continuous upgrade path promise, which is about deprecating any code that we want to remove in the next major before removing it. And this is a must. Sometimes there are people that come on the repository and say, oh, this is badly designed, in my opinion, so let's change it in Symfony 7 because we can, right? And we say, no, we can't. First, we have to work on 6, figure out how to trigger meaningful deprecations so that we can notice people that are using the deprecated way ahead of time. They can prepare, move to the next style, which should be also available in Symfony 6. And then when this is coded, we allow going up to 7 and removing the deprecated feature. So it's way more involving for maintainers and for the community, but this is critical to make it easy to move to the next major. While releasing new features every 6 months, we also ship new deprecations. You don't have to fix them because the deprecation is something that still works, right? It triggers a notice saying you should maybe not do that anymore, or at least if you continue to do it, it won't work in the next major. So you can average the cost of migrating to Symfony 7 by fixing that every 6 months also. I would recommend you to do that. Then the cost will be on many years and nobody will notice. Okay, so Symfony 7, it's not super fancy. It's a major version bump, so marketing would say, we need to have new innovation there. But no, if you understood what I said, and if you know the process, it's boring, as it should. So what we did is that we removed the deprecated code path, of course. We also added more native return types, which is a backward compatibility break. But it's nice. It's a more modern code base that we have in Symfony 7. We also dropped support for doctrine annotations. So all those blah, blah that you have in PHP docs, you must move them to attributes before going to Symfony 7. And that's true for doctrine also. So doctrine integration is going to require that. So basically, annotations are gone. Symfony 7 is fully attributes only. We also added types to public and protected properties where we could, which is most of the time we can. That's another backward compatibility break. So we created a way to warn you ahead of time when you were extending or overriding an existing property. So it should be smooth also. And then we bumped Twig minimum to 3, Debol doctrine to 3, Monologue to 3. There is something with version 3 of packages, I guess, because they get adults, I don't know, something like that. And we also removed 2 components, 2 packages that we don't use anymore. So one is templating, and the other one is Proxy Manager Bridge. They provide integration with those domains, and they are going to be still maintained with 6.4 for 3 more years, of course, right? But not after. So if you use them, you need to plan to move to something else. Proxy Manager Bridge is covering a feature that is now native, so you don't have to replace, you just have to upgrade because it works out of the box. Okay, so more things. We label pull requests as minor bug, security, or features. And there are things that we label as minor because they don't provide any new feature. But would you consider them as minor? Let me tell you. So we added a lot of annotations to provide generic template type information to our classes. So this is useful if you're using Psalm, PHP Stand, or your code editor. PHP Storm knows them very well. So there are a lot of pull requests that add those things on the code. We also added types to private and internal properties. We leverage new syntaxes like the arrow function, so short closures. We use the : class syntax, which replaces the get class function. It's just syntax to replace a function. And there is also this nice null coalescing assignment operator, which allows removing lines of code and making the code easier to read. Yeah. And the two previous slides I mentioned are consuming the community a lot of time. Those fit on 2 slides, but that's months of work, of course. So features, I guess you like features. I won't dive into those, but you should know that we have a few more components since 1 year about. So one is the clock component, the scheduler component, the asset mapper component, the remote event and the webhook components, which you know about because Alison gave a talk on this topic. The other ones, they are covered by Ryan or Fabian. So have a look. I won't dive into them much, but if you want to use them, just do. On the controller side, we added on the abstract controller a method called render block, so that then it's very easy inside a controller to return this render block and render only one block in a bigger twig file. This is very useful when using, for example, turbo streams, because you send a form and you reply with just a turbo stream, which is just the excerpt of HTML that needs to be updated in the HTML. So basically, you have a full HTML page, and then there is a block in the middle of this page, which is the rendered form. And you say, OK, render, but only this part of this bigger one, and send it back. And then Turbo will take that and inject it by doing some DOM manipulation to update the page. And this is going to be super seamless. So this, previously, we had to use several twig files, and now we can put that in one single twig file. So that's developer experience. Map query parameter. This is an attribute that you can use to get a query parameter. And map request body and map query string, they are ways to map an input JSON on a DTO. So let me show you an example with the map request body. So let's say you have this, a product review DTO. So it's a plain PHP class with some attributes to declare validation constraints. So that's your domain. This is a review with a comment and a rating. And let's say now that you have a controller. And if you want a JSON that fits this shape to be turned into a product review DTO, you just have to add the attribute map request payload and done. This will use the serializer component to turn the JSON into the object and the validator component to validate the object. If the JSON is invalid for any reason, this will generate a 422 invalid entity. And yeah, you will just deal with your objects in the end. So it's a way to draft quick APIs. It's not a replacement for API platform, but in many situations, you could just leverage that and not care much about the rest. I put at the bottom of the screen, this is an issue that we have, which is someone saying, oh, if one field is missing, then the violation list, so the resulting JSON, contains information about every single field. So there might be too many information. What I want to hint here is that this is new, and we'd like to have more feedback on this topic and to improve it if we can. So HTTP client, because you might communicate with external APIs, of course. So one is URI template HTTP client. This allows resolving URI templates in your JSON responses. So if you use hypermedia APIs or JSON documents, it's quite common to have them, the URLs, returned as templates. And thanks to this client, you can very easily turn those into actual URIs. It's also quite common to have a retry mechanism in the client because the remote endpoint can be down or having some issue. So there are two things you can do that there. One is have some kind of round robin retry mechanism where we can say with multiple base URI that you want to hit your first Elasticsearch most of the time, but if it's done, then you go to the second one. So that's why we added multiple base URI so that you can have failover and high availability with the automatic switch to the one that is still up. And max retries if you want to have fine-tuned control over the number of retries. On the security side, you know about the OpenID Connect tokens and users. So this is a talk from Vincent Chalamont yesterday, I think he made it. So you can have a look at the talk on this topic. We also added 2 attributes that you can use on your input forms, or actually to accept usernames and password. So no suspicious character is about ensuring that a username doesn't contain a mix of Latin and Cyrillic letters, for example, to do spoofing, identity theft with an A that is not a Latin A, but okay, you know about those spoofing attempts. And password strength is a way to compute a score, a complexity score for a password, like too short, too many repetitive letters, not enough various characters. So there are some algorithms on this topic that we implemented there to compute a node and say yes or no, basically. This is too weak, or etc. And then more. So this is my favorite component, I think. There are so many innovations that happen every year. Like, yeah, it never stops. Dependency injection is like the topic that has always news IDs coming in. So we removed, so the container now is going to remove a parameter if its name starts with a dot. Usually, since years, since the beginning, you can use parameters, container parameters, and especially in compiler passes, they are useful because somewhere you define the parameter, and then a compiler pass will use that to compile the container with this variable. The downside of parameters right now is that they are compiled. You can read them at runtime. So they are dumped into the generated container, but most parameters don't need to be read at runtime. They're just useful information that compile time needs, but runtime don't. So we added this convention. If a parameter starts with a dot, it's going to be removed from the dumped container. This enabled us to deprecate existing parameters so that we could move them to the new notation, right? So we had a foo parameter, and we said, okay, foo should not be used at runtime, so we're going to deprecate foo and to name it .foo so that then it can be removed. And we also added as alias, which is another attribute that allows configuring a class and register it as an alias for an interface or to replace a service. This is something that took us a few months to figure out correctly. This was requested 1 year ago, and this was implemented 4 months ago because we didn't know how to exactly make it work. So usually you don't care about those details because what matters is that it just works, and that's what we try to provide, making things just work. So this just works, and it works correctly. That's my part, hopefully. So then you can replace the auto-wearing alias for an interface, or you can replace a core service if you want to replace it by naming the alias with the name of the core service. Who knows? Maybe you want to do that. Still dependency injection. This is a new attribute that we added in 6.4, so you cannot use it yet, but you will be able to use it soon. This is an example of it. So you have an argument container with the type container interface. So this is an object with 2 methods. One is get, the other is has, right? But what can you get? What can you check? The attribute can tell. This tells this container is going to have a key named router, and this should be a router interface object. And the other one is named slugger. The interrogation mark says it's fine if there are no sluggers. I accept. I will check with has before. and then a Slugger interface object. So this is a super nice way to define scoped locators. Right now you can using the service subscriber interface, which requires implementing a static method, returning an array with this shape. I hope this might replace that for the better. We'll see. Let me know. So it's very new, not released, not used by the community, but maybe. So two more things on the DI component. We have auto wire lazy true. You remember at the beginning I mentioned auto configure lazy true, which makes a service lazy. This one is on the opposite side of the injection point. It's a class that says, please give me this dependency, but make it lazy when I use it. The service is not lazy itself, it's wrapped just for the injection point with something that makes it lazy. Okay? And the last one, I like it, auto-wire callable is something that bridges closures and functional interfaces. A functional interface is an interface with one single method. That's it. An interface with one single method is just a closure with a name. A closure is just an interface, an abstract, anonymous one with no name, right? But it's the same thing. So we can map one to the other, and this is what the auto-wire callable attribute does. So this is an example. Let's say you have a constructor, and you need something that is called an expander, which implements URI expander interface, a functional interface of your own. And now let's say you have a URI template implementation that does not implement URI expander interface. But it does implement a method named expand that fits the contract, right? Let's say we have that, and this is the situation here. This is a third-party library. URI template is something from Guzzle. It exists in Guzzle. URI expander interface is your domain. If you use, so basically what we do is that we take this Guzzle URI template implementation, we take the method, expand, and we turn it into a closure. This notation, 3 dots, makes a closure out of the method. So then we have an object. It's a named anonymous function, a named closure. And we make Symfony generate the boilerplate around. So this is what Symfony will generate, a class, anonymous, that implements the interface of our domain. It gets the closure as argument. And then when you call the expand method, the one from our interface, internally it's going to call the closure. And done. This is an adapter from one domain to the other one with one attribute. I hope you'll like it, and I hope you'll use it a lot. Okay, serializer. I collected a few things on the serializer component. The translatable normalizer is going to look at your objects, the objects you want to serialize, and if they implement the translatable interface, and if you have this normalizer in your serializer, Symfony will translate them. So it's going to be easier, I hope, to translate the content of some JSON responses, for example. Minor thing, but useful. You know the context attribute that is passed then to the serializer to know how to precisely serialize an object. You can now put that on the class level so that it applies to the full class instead of only the properties. There is a new option to the JSON decode decoder, which is called JSON decode detailed errors. And you know, when you get an invalid JSON, JSON decode, the native PHP function, returns syntax error. Cool. What do you do with that? Right? So fortunately, Composer, the guys, so Jordi and Niels from Composer, they wrote a library because they had the issue with the Composer JSON file. And if you run Composer update and there is a mistake there, syntax error is not going to be a friendly error for the PHP community. So they say you, hey, on this line there is a missing quote or blah, 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 right? So there is a full library that does that. And if you use that, it will do that. So basically the error you'll get will say deserialization failed. On line 1, invalid string, it appears you use single quotes instead of double quotes. This is nice, right? So you need to turn the option on, but you should, at least during development, and maybe also during prod. It depends on who are your clients on the other side. There is a pull request. It's still open that allows creating services to compute validation groups. So right now, validation groups, you add them on the properties of your entity, of your DTOs, of the object you serialize. And now you can move that logic, that description in a in an external service that will return the validation groups for a specific object. I put that in the serializer component. It's in the validation component, but both are used together, so it still fits, right? Sorry about that. And then there is a pull request that has been opened 3 hours ago about rewriting the way the serializer component works internally. So if you want to have a look, it's super new. It's not going to be in 7.0, at least I don't think so, because it's too big, like 15,000 lines of fixtures, I hope. Tests? No? I hope it's not code only. So, okay, that's super nice. There is a super nice interaction between API platform, Symfony, so that we can share the expertise, the knowledge, the effort also of maintaining and improving the state of the art on this domain. And this is awesome. Okay, various goodies. We added support for UID version 7. Who knows what this means? Okay. What is UID version 4? It's a random thing. Version 4 is a string 128 bits of random data, basically. Version 7, so random data is bad for primary key. So if you use that right now, you're doing this in a bad way. Bad, I mean, they don't work correctly with database indexes. So the way database indexes work makes that underperformant. To work correctly with database indexes, you need to have sequences of numbers. Like if you have IDs that are chained in order, in alphabetical order, then it works correctly, right? So UID version 7 is something that is increasing. It's a number that is increasing. And it's increasing because it contains a timestamp, and it contains also a random part, so that can't collide. And the random part is also increased within the same millisecond, because you can have two IDs generated during the same millisecond, and if you ask for two of them very quickly, you will get the same random number plus 1, plus 2, plus 3, etc. within the same millisecond. Right? So it's super clever, and it's a draft RFC from the IETF, so it's almost a standard, and you should use that. It's going to be the default UID in Symfony 7 for these reasons. The request object, you know about this one, it's the old request object from Symfony 2. It has now a getPayload method, which returns an array. So if you submit a form, you can get the array payload submitted for the form, and if it's a JSON API, you will get the decoded JSON as an array also. So it's also good to draft quick APIs if you need to. The last one is not merged yet. It's still under discussion, but it links directly to Kevin's talk. It's about adding a new environment variable, which could be called app runtime mode. And this one would say if we are running Symfony in worker mode or in FPM mode, which is short-lived request response. So that then we know how to configure Symfony. For example, right now in the code, there are many places where we say, are we using the CLI SAPI? So are we running in the context of the console? Or are we running in the FPM context, right? And then based on that, we decide if we render the output using NC colors or not, for example. But if you run in worker mode, like using Swool or React, etc., you are in CLI mode, and you are rendering wait pages. You see, there is a mismatch there. So the SAPI is not the correct way to define and to configure Symfony, and we need something more, a hint from the outside, an environment variable, and FrankenPHP could leverage that to turn Symfony into the correct mode, long running or not. And I'm done. I hope you like that. I have a few credits because this didn't happen thanks to my work only. This happened thanks to the work of many, many contributors. So I counted 360 in the last month. It's about 500 per year, unique contributors. So that's huge. Thanks to them. Thank you, really, really, really. That's really powerful. Like, it's hard to compete with such a crowd of skilled people. A nice crowd. It works also because we have backers. So 6.3 is the latest, so that's why I put them on the slide. Those are logos for you, but those are also people that believe in what Symfony is doing as a community and want to support that. So Sensio Labs, you know this name, of course, but Shopware, Letiel, of course, Basecamp, Sulu, Crodin, Blackfire, Cosmic, and Platform SH. They were more before, and they're going to be more in the future. So in your company, each of you could be a sponsor at least once in your lifetime, in the company's lifetime. That would be amazing. So feel free to reach me. I would be happy to let you know how this works so that you can just support Symfony, right? Everything before requires funding also. And the last slide is about the community, because this is the most important thing in Symfony, the community. So I mentioned mutual aid because I'm seeing that a lot, especially on Slack. That's why I'm also inviting you on the Slack channel. This is where I meet the members of the community every day. Every day I have a question. Every day there are so many interactions, not only with me, but on the support channel, on the victory channel, on the thank you channel, on the general channel, on the PHP channel, the doctrine channel. So you see there are topics everywhere. Ideas are shared all around. So this is a really welcoming community with kindness, etc. There is a care team also, which is critical to ensure that we have a way to enforce a minimum level of politeness and well-behaving behaviors, right? Thank you very much. If you have any questions, maybe we have time, but I hope you enjoyed and you learned a few things. Thank you.